was a rather remarkable actor, and he wrote it and directed it.
For decades, Tim Curry owned the spotlight. His voice could silence a theater. Just one line or one look, and the room belonged to him. He was electric, untouchable, and larger than life. But then one ordinary afternoon in 2012, something extremely tragic happened behind the walls of his Los Angeles home. A sudden, devastating health crisis struck without warning, threatening to erase his voice forever. The world later watched him try to fight his way back, piece by fragile piece. And now, years after that terrifying day, Tim Curry has shared a new update about his condition, and what he revealed has left fans stunned and deeply heartbroken. Tim Curry's rise to fame. There are some faces that simply cannot be forgotten. Tim Curry has one of them. For more than 4 decades, he was everywhere, commanding Broadway stages, stealing scenes in Hollywood, and shaping childhoods through animation and video games. His voice alone could sell a ticket. But then, in the summer of 2012, he vanished from public life after he suffered a major stroke. Curry was hospitalized for a long while, and his life changed forever. But recently, there's been a recent heartbreaking update on his health, and it's more tragic than anyone knew. Timothy James Curry was born on April 19, 1946, in the village of Grappenhall in Cheshire, England. His father, James Curry, was a chaplain in the Royal Navy, a Methodist minister who served aboard ships during the war. His mother, Maura, known always as Pat, was of Irish descent. They had met in Malta during the war, married in Egypt, and had their first child, a daughter named Judith, before Tim was born. Tim himself was conceived in South Africa, but by the time he was 6 months old, the family had relocated to Hong Kong. This was how his early years unfolded. The Curry family moved constantly, following James's naval postings from one corner of the British Empire to another. South Africa, then Cheshire, then Hong Kong, then finally Plymouth. They were never in one place long enough to sink roots. For a child, this kind of upbringing leaves a mark. It can create a sense of never quite belonging anywhere, of always being the new person in the room. But it can also create adaptability, a chameleon-like ability to read new situations and become whoever you need to be. Tim Curry developed both. He absorbed accents and mannerisms the way other children absorbed sunlight. Later, he would credit his nomadic childhood with his ability to disappear into roles, to mimic voices and physicalities that were not his own. He learned early that identity was something you could put on and take off like a coat. When Tim was 12, the family settled in Plymouth for good, but the reason was not a happy one. His father had suffered a stroke, and while he survived the initial event, his health was broken and he could no longer serve at sea. The family moved to be near Tim's maternal grandfather, settling into a more stable existence than they had ever known. It was there, in 1958, that James died, when Tim was just 12 years old. The loss of a father at that age is a fundamental wound, and it reshaped everything. The family, already strained by years of upheaval, now faced financial and emotional pressures that had no easy solution. Tim's mother, Pat, was left to raise 2 children alone. She was a complicated woman, as Tim would later describe her. She could be warm and loving, but she could also turn cold without warning. He came to believe she may have been bipolar because her moods could shift so suddenly. After her husband's death, her expectations for her son changed. She became protective, but also controlling. She wanted him to keep his head down, to avoid attention. Being noticed, in her view, was dangerous. It invited trouble. Despite the difficulties at home, Tim excelled in school. He earned a scholarship to Kingswood School in Bath, a Methodist boarding school that offered him an escape from the tensions of family life. At Kingswood, he found something he had not known he was looking for. He sang in the choir, developing a strong soprano voice that would later deepen into the instrument the world would come to know, and he began to act in school plays. On stage, he discovered a place where he belonged, where being noticed was not just permitted, but required. From Kingswood, he went on to study drama and English at the University of Birmingham, graduating in 1968 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. His path was now clear. He would be an actor, but breaking into the profession was not easy. He had no connections, no family money, and no safety net. What he had was talent and enough nerve to make up for what he lacked. His first professional role came later that same year in the original London production of the musical Hair. But there was only one obstacle. He was not a member of the Actors Union, Equity, and he had no professional experience to speak of. So he lied. He told the producers he had his equity card and that he had worked professionally before. They believed him, and by the time they discovered the truth, they were so impressed by his talent that they sponsored his union membership themselves. It was a gamble that paid off, and it set the pattern for much of his early career. He would take chances, trust his instincts, and hope they carried him through. 5 years later, O'Brien would write a musical called The Rocky Horror Picture Show. 5 years later, O'Brien would write a strange, low-budget musical about a mad scientist from outer space. He would think of Tim Curry for the lead role, and the rest would become the kind of legend that only happens when the right person meets the right part at exactly the right moment. But the role that made him famous also trapped him, and the years that followed would demand pieces of himself he never intended to give. The fame had a cost, and it was only beginning to reveal itself. Shadows behind the fame. By the mid-1980s, Tim Curry had played Dr. Frankenfurter on stage and screen more times than he could count. The role had made him famous, but it had also attached itself to him like a second skin that could not be removed. Casting directors did not see a classically trained actor who had studied at Cambridge and performed with the royal court. They saw a man in fishnets and lipstick, and they hired him accordingly. The parts that came his way were almost always variations on a theme. He played villains, eccentrics, characters who existed on the margins of stories and stole every scene they were in. He was the cardinal in the Three Musketeers, wicked and witty and utterly without conscience. He was darkness in Ridley Scott's Legend, a towering horned demon whose voice alone could freeze blood. He was Pennywise in the 1990 adaptation of Stephen King's It, a shape-shifting clown who haunted the nightmares of an entire generation. Each performance was remarkable, but each one reinforced the same expectation. Curry was the man you hired when you wanted memorable, when you wanted dangerous, or when you wanted someone to upstage the hero and vanish before the credits rolled. What audiences rarely saw was the actor beneath the makeup. Curry had trained for the stage, not the screen. He had studied drama at the University of Birmingham and cut his teeth in London theater, appearing in the original production of Hair before moving on to Shakespeare, Stoppard, and Schaffer. He had played Mozart in Amadeus on Broadway and earned rave reviews. He had sung the lead in The Pirates of Penzance, proving that his voice could handle Gilbert and Sullivan as easily as rock and roll. But these performances reached a fraction of the audience that knew him only from film. The stage work existed in a different world that most moviegoers never visited. In 1978, between film roles, he released his first solo album. Read My Lips was a collection of rock and cabaret songs that showcased his versatility as a singer. 2 more albums followed, Fearless in 1979 and Simplicity in 1981. Both critically admired and commercially ignored. His voice was extraordinary, capable of tenderness and menace in the same phrase, but the music industry did not know what to do with him. He was too theatrical for rock, too rock for theater, too famous for one thing, and not famous enough for another. The albums faded into obscurity, and he never made another. There were roles he wanted that never materialized. He was considered for the lead in Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera, but producers hesitated. They worried that audiences would see Frankenfurter in the Phantom's mask and that the association would be too strong to overcome. He auditioned for other parts, heroic parts, and romantic leads, but they went to other actors. The shadow of that first role stretched long and dark across his career, closing doors that might have opened to something new. In 1993, he returned to Broadway in My Favorite Year, a musical based on the film about a struggling writer assigned to chaperone a swashbuckling movie star. Curry played the star, Alan Swan, a role that allowed him to be charming and funny and vulnerable in ways his film parts rarely did. He was nominated for a Tony Award. 5 years later, he was nominated again for his work in a revival of Annie Get Your Gun. In 2005, he earned a third nomination for Spamalot, the Monty Python musical in which he played King Arthur with a warmth and wit that reminded everyone what he could do when given the chance. But Tonys are not Oscars. Broadway recognition did not translate to Hollywood leading roles, and the pattern continued. Through all of this, Curry kept his private life completely invisible. He never married and had no children, a fact that fueled endless speculation, but which he never addressed directly. He gave interviews about his work, about the characters he played, and about the craft of acting, but he deflected every question that strayed into personal territory. Friends described him as warm, generous, and hilarious in private, but fiercely protective of the boundary between his public persona and his private self. He did not attend Hollywood parties or court publicity. He built a life in London and later Los Angeles that revolved around work and friendship rather than celebrity. This privacy meant that his public image was shaped entirely by the characters he played. Audiences knew Pennywise and Frankenfurter and Cardinal Richelieu, but they did not know Tim Curry. They could not separate the man from the masks. In some ways, this was exactly what he wanted. The masks were the work. The man behind them was his own. But privacy also meant isolation. When the work slowed, as it inevitably does for actors as they age, there was no public narrative to fill the gaps. No magazine profiles about his home life. No talk show appearances about his hobbies. And no social media accounts offering glimpses into his days. By the late 2000s, the work had begun to slow in earnest. He took fewer roles. He moved more slowly. In 2011, he made a few guest appearances on television, including a memorable turn on Psych that showed he had lost none of his comic timing. But something was shifting beneath the surface, something no one outside his inner circle could see. On July 14, 2012, Tim Curry was at his home in Los Angeles when he felt something was wrong. Soon, the man who had built a career on his voice, on his physical presence, and on the sheer force of his charisma lost the tools of his trade. And this experience would test him in a way no film role Yadish ever had. The health crisis that changed Tim's life. On the afternoon of July 14, 2012, Tim Curry was at his home in Los Angeles doing something ordinary. He was receiving a massage, a routine appointment that gave no hint of what was about to happen. But then his body began to betray him in ways he could not understand. The masseuse, whose name has never been made public, noticed that something was wrong. Curry himself did not fully grasp the severity of what was happening, but the masseuse working with him recognized the signs. He called an ambulance, and that call saved Curry's life. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that he had suffered a major ischemic stroke. This type of stroke occurs when blood flow to the brain is blocked, depriving brain tissue of oxygen. In Curry's case, the blockage was severe enough to require emergency surgery. The surgeons who operated on him faced a difficult situation. They needed to relieve pressure on his brain, and to do that, they had to remove a portion of his skull. In his 2024 memoir, Vagabond, Curry described the procedure in characteristically frank terms. He revealed that bone fragments were temporarily placed in his abdomen to preserve them until they could be reattached later. The surgery saved his life, but it could not undo what the stroke had already done. When he woke, the left side of his face was paralyzed. He could not walk. He could not speak. For a man whose voice had been his primary instrument for more than 4 decades, this was a loss that defied comprehension. He had sung on Broadway and on albums. He had voiced countless animated characters. He had delivered lines that lodged in the memories of millions. Now he could not form a sentence. The months that followed were spent in hospitals and rehabilitation facilities. He had to relearn basic functions that most people never think about. How to hold a fork, how to stand, how to shape words with a mouth that no longer moved the way it once had. The work was grueling and slow, and there were no guarantees. Stroke recovery is unpredictable. Some patients regain much of what they lose. Others do not. Curry fell somewhere in between. He learned to speak again, but his voice was different now, slower, more deliberate, requiring effort in ways it never had before. He learned to move again, but he would need a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The stroke effectively ended his ability to perform in physically demanding roles. He would never again walk onto a stage and command it the way he had in Amadeus or Spamalot. He would never again throw himself into a film role that required running or fighting or the kind of physical presence that had defined so much of his career. That part of his life was over, but his voice remained. It was changed, but it was still unmistakably his. In the years after the stroke, he transitioned almost entirely to voice acting, working from home with the help of friends and collaborators. He voiced characters in animated series, in video games, and in projects that allowed him to work on his own terms. His distinctive voice was still in demand, and he could provide it without the physical demands of live performance. His public appearances became rare and carefully managed. When he did appear at conventions or special events, he was always in his wheelchair, often with assistance from friends or caregivers. Fans who had grown up watching him would wait in line for hours just to see him for a few minutes. When he entered a room, he was always greeted by standing ovations. At the Academy Museum in Los Angeles in 2023, the applause went on so long that he was visibly moved, wiping tears from his eyes as the crowd refused to stop. The financial impact of the stroke was significant. A career built on physical performance could no longer provide the same income. But Curry had been working for more than 4 decades, and his body of work continued to generate royalties. His voice work provided steady, if modest, income, and his cult status ensured that fans would pay to see him at conventions, where appearances helped offset the limitations imposed by his health. He was never wealthy by Hollywood standards, but he was stable, and stability after a stroke is its own kind of wealth. Throughout his recovery and the years that followed, Curry maintained the fierce privacy that had always defined his personal life. He made public statements about his health when necessary, but he revealed nothing about the emotional toll, about the dark days, and about the moments when he must have wondered whether recovery was possible at all. His friends spoke for him occasionally, describing his resilience, his humor, and his refusal to give in to despair. But Curry himself remained guarded, letting the work speak for him as it always had. In 2024, he published his memoir, Vagabond. The book was not a tell-all. It did not reveal secrets or settle scores, but it was exactly what Curry had always been, focused on the work, on the craft, and on the life he had lived as an actor. He wrote about the stroke in clinical terms, describing the surgery and the recovery without dwelling on the emotional weight. He wrote about his childhood and his career, about the roles he had played and the people he had worked with. But he maintained the same boundaries he had always maintained with his private life. The stroke took many things from Tim Curry. It took his ability to walk, to perform, to move through the world as he once had. But it did not take his spirit. It did not take his voice, and it did not take the love of the fans who have carried him through the darkest days. What remains is a man who survived something terrible and found a way to keep going, to keep working, to keep showing up. For more than a decade, fans believed they knew the shape of Tim Curry's recovery. He had survived a major stroke, learned to speak again, and settled into a quiet life out of the spotlight. But a recent interview has revealed something else entirely, something that changes the way his last 10 years must be understood. This update about his physical health is far more heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Tim Curry's tragic health update. The 50th anniversary celebration of the 50th anniversary celebration of the Rocky Horror Picture Show held at the Academy Museum, and Curry was the reason everyone had come. It had been 13 years since his stroke, and his appearances in that time had been rare, carefully managed, and always emotional. But this was different. This was the film that had made him, the role that had defined him, and he was there to celebrate it with the people who had carried it through 5 decades. His voice was slower than it once had been. His voice was slower than it once had been, requiring effort in ways it never used to, but it was still unmistakably his. That voice, the one that had seduced its way through countless performances, was still there, weathered but intact. He addressed his limitations directly, as he always does. He confirmed that he still cannot walk and remains wheelchair-bound, 13 years after the stroke that changed everything. He mentioned his left leg specifically, joking that it continued to give him trouble, and he made clear that no one should expect a performance anytime soon. He said, "I still can't walk, which is why I'm in this silly chair, and that's very limiting. So I won't be singing, and I won't be dancing very soon. "I still have real problems with my left leg." Despite the physical limitations, he appeared in good spirits throughout the evening. He spoke warmly about the film's legacy, about the strange journey it had taken from box office failure to midnight sensation to enduring cultural touchstone. He talked about Frankenfurter as if discussing an old friend, with affection and a touch of wonder that the character had meant so much to so many for so long. The audience hung on every word, and when they applauded, they did not stop. Curry wiped tears from his eyes as the ovation rolled over him, wave after wave. The anniversary appearance was a reminder of what his life has become since 2012. He lives full-time in a wheelchair, requiring assistance for daily activities that most people never think about. Caregivers and aides help him navigate his home in Los Angeles, where he lives largely alone but with professional support. Friends visit regularly. Former colleagues check in. But the isolation that comes with his condition is real, and it has shaped his later years in ways that are not always visible from the outside. His resilience, though, remains intact. Those who spend time with him describe the same wit, the same intelligence, and the same warmth that defined him before the stroke. He jokes about his limitations rather than lamenting them. He engages with fans at conventions and events, signing autographs and posing for photographs despite the effort it requires. The financial realities of his situation are difficult to pin down with precision. Estimates of his net worth vary widely depending on the source. Some outlets place it around $8 million, while others suggest it may be closer to $14 million. What is clear is that his income since the stroke has come from several sources. Voice acting remains the most significant, with his distinctive sound still in demand for animated series and video games. Royalties from his extensive film, television, and music catalog provide a steady foundation, and convention appearances like the Rocky Horror Anniversary offer both income and the kind of connection with fans that money cannot measure. In September 2025, the same month as the anniversary celebration, Curry sat for an interview with CBS Sunday Morning that revealed more about his interior life than he had ever shared before. He spoke about the immediate aftermath of Rocky Horror, about the disappointment he felt when the film initially failed. He said, "It died a death. It was a failure. I was crushed. I thought that it might well be the end of my movie career, but I was tougher than that." This was a remarkable confession from a man who would go on to work steadily for decades. That failure, of course, transformed into something else entirely. The film found its audience at midnight screenings and then expanded to become a global phenomenon. Curry expressed gratitude for that transformation and for the way the film empowered audiences to express themselves freely. He remains proud of what Rocky Horror gave to people, especially to those who felt like outsiders, who needed permission to be different. The character he created became a lifeline for generations of fans, and he knows it. His reflections on life and career carried the weight of someone who has faced mortality and continued forward. He acknowledged both the challenges of his health and the enduring love from fans that has sustained him through the hardest years. There was no bitterness in his voice, no regret about what the stroke had taken. There was simply acceptance and gratitude for what remained. The heartbreaking part of this update is that Curry's health may never improve. The stroke in 2012 caused permanent damage, and the limitations he lives with today are the limitations he may always live with. He may never walk again. He may never perform on stage again, and he may never return to the life he knew before that July afternoon when his body betrayed him. And yet he continues. He shows up and he connects with the fans who have loved him for 50 years. The man who thought Rocky Horror had ended his career now understands that it gave him something far more valuable than fame. It gave him a place in the hearts of millions, a place that no stroke could ever touch. Tim Curry is 79 years old. He uses a wheelchair. He speaks slowly and with effort, but he is still here, still present, and still unmistakably himself. Would you like to see Tim Curry make a comeback to the big screen? Drop your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.